Has climate change been on your mind lately? I don't blame you. We all see those images. Boy, seeing the images coming out of Greece over the last couple of weeks for me, talking to friends that are closer than they'd like to be to those wildfires, and we see those stories from right here in Canada. We've seen wildfires in Canada. The heat has been an issue, obviously. In weather news, it's a hot one. It's been a scorcher of a week in Montreal. And of course, there's a new report from the United Nations that is out that is getting a lot of attention, painting a dire picture, but also one with a bit of hope. Let's go to Keith Stewart now. He's Senior Energy Strategist at Greenpeace. Hi, Keith. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, when the UN releases this report, do you say, well, tell me something I don't know, or do you take notice in a big way?
I've been following these reports for decades, actually. Mm-hmm. And I think the real shift here has been, they're starting to use words like unequivocal to make sure that the policymakers really get it. But also the real change to me has been these words used to be about changes that were going to happen. And this report is saying climate change is already here now. Mm-hmm. And it's human choices, the things we decide to do now that are going to affect how bad it gets. Because it's going to be bad, but we still can avoid catastrophic. And this is where, I think that element of hope is, even though we're seeing these extreme weather events fueled by carbon pollution being fiercer than ever before, at the same time, we're seeing real breakthroughs with solutions, solar, wind, now being the cheapest way to produce power. This is a problem that we can solve before we hit some of those climate tipping points, which would spin things right out of control. But it requires dramatic action by governments, basically, and that means citizens pressing to do it. And a federal election is probably a good time to start making these calls.
We're with Keith Stewart, Senior Energy Strategist at Greenpeace. And Keith, one of the reasons I like talking to you is your title, Senior Energy Strategist. I think it's really vital here, and you just touched upon it, right? We have insatiable energy needs. The planet needs energy just to get by and heating and all that kind of thing. And you touched on wind and solar, and I would add batteries into the mix here.
Oh, yeah.
Hydro-Quebec, which has the cheapest energy rates in North America, and we've had the CEO of Hydro-Quebec on the program. And even though we have the cheapest hydro rates and we have an abundance of hydro, they've told us their future is wind and solar because it's even cheaper. So you brought up the solutions here, right? And that there are solutions there. So what do we need to do right now to make sure we're grabbing those solutions that can make the difference and going full steam ahead?
So conveniently, the International Energy Agency, which is kind of, they've been pro-oil, pro-fossil fuels from their founding in 1973 in response to the first oil crisis. They just put out a report a couple of months ago saying, okay, if we're serious about climate change, we actually have to stop building new fossil fuel projects right now. And we need to develop a plan for an accelerated transition off of fossil fuels onto renewables. And I think the biggest block in Canada really is the oil lobby. I mean, they're incredibly powerful in Ottawa, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, et cetera. And they're basically saying, okay, we need to go slow. We can talk about maybe, slowing down the growth, but we're going to need fossil fuels forever. And the science report from the IPCC is saying, look, we have to get off of fossil fuels incredibly quickly. This is going to be really hard. It's going to be difficult. It's a challenge, but we can do it. The only thing worse than doing it is not doing it. Because when you look at them, they have these wonderful interactive maps now. This is the first time the IPCC has done this. You can go into these maps. They actually, can bring me to tears when you watch, oh, look, click here. And that means the Amazon rainforest is gone by 2050. Mm-hmm. It's, they can show us the costs of inaction, what this means. There's going to be 2 more reports coming out next year. This first report is just on the pure science, then what's going to be the impact on human communities. And then the third one is what can we do about it? And I think these reports have been coming up for a long time, but the fact that they're coming out at the same time that we're seeing, incredible floods in Africa. We're seeing Greece, as you were mentioning, Nitra on fire. The West is on fire. In Toronto, we've had A couple of weeks ago, we had the third worst air quality in the entire world among cities because of smoke from wildfires in northern Ontario. It's not something that's abstract anymore. You literally can feel it in your lungs when you get up in the morning. You can see the red moon and the red sun telling you something's wrong here. Mm-hmm. And I think we have the ability to deal with this. It's just, let's get on with the solutions. And part of that is going to be the rest of Canada helping out workers, communities in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, who are, we're going to be moving off of oil. Those jobs aren't going to disappear immediately, but we're not going to build new stuff. We need to start that phase out. We need to get those jobs in green energy and do this together. I think in some of the same ways we've actually responded to the pandemic. People who lost their jobs during the pandemic got support from the federal government because, they had lost their jobs through no fault of their own. Mm-hmm. We came together. We didn't see the kind of economic collapse that was feared. And, if we work together, we can do incredible things.
And, of course, there are some roadblocks politically. You mentioned Alberta, and Jason Kenney can be viewed as a huge roadblock to something you're proposing there. I want to, listen, Keith, I am an eternal optimist. I'm a positive kind of guy. And I look at the challenges this planet has faced before and people have faced before, and I think the human story is overcoming a lot of these things. So when we get to solutions, we mentioned the renewables and that piece there. Is there other reasons, technology-wise, why you have optimism and hope, whether it's technology to take carbon out of the atmosphere, stuff like that, or do you think that side of the equation is more pipe dream than anything?
No, there's all kinds of solutions in sort of every sector. We're going to need them in every sector. So, it's not very sexy, but one of the things is just to make our homes, factories, equipment more energy efficient. And there, we've seen, a modern light bulb uses about 2 or 3% of the electricity of an old one. A new fridge uses 25% of the electricity of an old one. We also need to see investments in things like public transit, but also making cities more walkable and bikeable. And I don't know about Montreal, but from a distance it looks similar. But in Toronto, actually, another interesting side effect of the pandemic is we've actually built a whole bunch of bike lanes and pedestrian infrastructure so people can get around. But those investments in public transit, the shift to electric vehicles, we don't want to replace. We don't want to have we need to sort of drive less, have better transportation solutions. But the incredible improvements in electric vehicles and battery technology.
Can I be negative here for a second? Because I just, as Absolutely. You were saying that answer there, now I'm feeling negative here because, making cities more pedestrian bike friendly, I get that. But then I'm thinking about the billions of people over the next couple of generations that are going to be going from poverty to middle class status in many countries around the world, and they're going to want energy. So I don't know how that balances out.
Well, Greenpeace, we're active in over 40 countries around the world, including, in Africa, Asia, South America. And what's really interesting is watching, a bunch of those countries, they're starting to leapfrog now straight from, rather than going through the kind of coal and oil phase, they're kind of jumping straight to renewables because they're the cheapest form of new power. In the same way, if you go to many parts of the world, they didn't actually develop the whole infrastructure for landline telephones. Everyone just went straight to cell phones because, frankly, they work better. Yes. And I think, so there is some hope there that we'll be able to meet those energy needs because, people need energy, but we don't need to burn fossil fuels to get it. And, frankly, some of this is also going to have to be about dealing with inequality. A huge proportion of carbon emissions actually come from sort of the wealthiest 1 in 10% of the population, people flying around on private jets. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. So, one of the things Greenpeace supports is we need a wealth tax to help pay for the investments in green infrastructure.
Keith, you mentioned the T word, the tax word, and I'll use that as my cue to get out. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's not because you said tax, but I do need to get out of the interview anyways. Hey, Fair Keith, listen, come back anytime. I really appreciate your voice on the program. Keith Stewart is the Senior Energy Strategist at Greenpeace Canada.